to use as a guide for what is right and wrong.
Right and wrong, anything from bad feelings inside of you to experience to asking someone for their opinion who you believe will give you and guide you in the right way.
My brain.
Wise people.
There's a lot of things. You can use the Bible, you can use, just common sense sometimes.
I usually just go with the moment, which is probably wrong. I'm gonna admit my faults right now. I do just go with the moment, and a lot of times you end up regretting it.
Things that I've grown up with, things that my parents have taught me with, like things that they teach me not to do.
I don't know.
Honestly, you would think the Bible, but I don't. A little bit, but mostly like what I was taught when I was younger, you know? We were taught everything that was right and wrong when we were younger.
Basically my own value system, and I was brought up to be a certain way, and whether I follow it or not has become my choice, so it's what I believe in, what I should do.
You know, I have my own little code of ethics, and I just try to live by that and not hurt anybody and not do right by other people. I've just read a lot of books, you know, a little bit on Buddhism, a little Kabbalah. I was also raised Catholic, so I kind of mixed a little bit of everything and make up my own.
I just believe treat others the way you want to be treated. One thing I got at a Catholic school.
All of us have some code by which we live, some set of principles that guides our lives.
Our code of ethics may be influenced by the media, our teachers, our peers, our family, or all of the above.
Some of us even look to our faith to help us make choices about how to live our lives.
Even among people who don't consider themselves religious, probably the most well-known list of rules for living a good life is the 10 Commandments.
We may not have each one of them memorized, but we all get the basic ideas.
Love God, do no harm, and love and respect others.
Do you live by the 10 Commandments?
How relevant do you find them to be in the challenges of modern life?
The 10 Commandments in the 21st century. That's what we'll be talking about today. Hi everyone, I'm Jack.
And I'm Marissa.
And this is Realfaith TV. Our spotlight guest today, Jeff, is a big fan of the 10 Commandments.
He believes that trying your best to follow the 10 Commandments will lead to happiness in your life.
We'll meet him later in the show, along with our studio guests.
But first, let's go back to the teens on the street and find out if they think that the 10 Commandments are relevant to our lives today.
Let's check it out.
Do you think that the 10 Commandments are relevant to our society and our lives today?
Depends on the person. Each person has their own beliefs, so.
Oh, that's tough. I don't necessarily think so, because nobody really follows it.
Depends who you ask.
Oh, definitely. They're relevant, but you have to put them into today's lives. They're pretty general. Shall not steal.
Yes, I think it is something that one could use.
I think there are certain commandments that you should follow, but others I don't really think are as crucial to be a part of your life as people make them out to be.
With stealing and murder and all that, that's good, but certain things are outdated, like they don't have drug dealing, they don't have a lot of problems that the kids are going through today,
I think that a lot of them are important, but some of them, honestly, I don't even remember. So obviously, if they were really important, I would remember them. Like thou shalt not kill, pretty important. So that, things like that.
Yeah, the rules like thou shalt not kill or steal. Those you definitely have to follow by today.
They are, if you believe in every single one, but it's very hard to go by every single one.
Yeah, they're good ethics, guidelines to life. They're just stuff that shouldn't be done anyways.
They're somewhat relevant. I don't know what all of them are, but I think they're pretty relevant.
It seemed that some of the teens in the street were familiar with a few of the commandments, like respecting our parents, not stealing, and not killing.
Let's meet our guests and find out whether they allow the 10 Commandments to direct their choices.
They are Caitlin, Elias, Kristen, Ian, Kira, and Jen.
What guidelines do you follow when it comes to how you live your life? Do you use the 10 Commandments as a guide?
Sometimes the 10 Commandments aren't always the first thing that comes to your mind probably because they don't have immediate, repercussions on your life. Like for some reason, I follow the government. If you do something bad, you will get reprimanded for it if you are caught.
I tend to follow what my parents instilled to me as a child. They taught me not to steal and not to kill, and then I would get in trouble for it. Sort of like what lives to say.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kristen. Yeah, you listen to your parents because they teach you, they discipline you when you're a child, so you learn. But then as you grow older, I think you start to follow the 10 Commandments once you start to like understand their meaning.
As a little kid, I was always taught the 10 Commandments, and that's how I followed my life, and it based my morals in my life.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind that although, unlike the government, they might not seem to have legal repercussions, if you break the 10 Commandments, it does have spiritual repercussions, which can be infinitely more harmful. And it's important to keep those in mind. And I think we've all, especially if you've grown up Catholic, like it's something that kind of becomes part of you. And then as you get older, you start to read into them a little more and understand it's not necessarily just what's on the paper, but it has different meanings. Like you shall not kill isn't just physical; it could be like spiritual killing. Like, you know, if you put somebody down, you're killing a part of their soul. So they really have a lot broader implications.
I know, like along with the 10 Commandments, I also use this thing I learned in social justice class. This guy Kant had this categorical imperative, which basically says if you don't want something applied as a universal rule, then don't do it. And I find that, like, along with the 10 Commandments, that works really well. The first 3 commandments are about loving God, and the next 7 are about loving others.
What do the commandments have to offer us in the 21st century? How are they relevant?
Let's meet Jeff, who will tell us that while some people feel the 10 Commandments constrain us, he believes that they liberate us.
I think the 10 Commandments are great guidelines for how we can live our lives morally and happily. Oftentimes we think of them as things that bog us down, that keep us from having a good time or being happy. I remember the story I once heard. A bunch of kids were placed into a median, or the strip of land that divides a highway. And they were terrified, so they ran to the center and they cowered. But then they took the kids out and built a fence around the same strip of land and put the kids back in it. And instead of being terrified, the kids went out and used the whole space and played and were happy. In the same way, the 10 Commandments, the rules, don't have to constrain us. They liberate us to live freely and happily. Because the 10 Commandments are still relevant today, we're still called to obey them, to fulfill them. And we'll find that when we do that, when we live our lives according to these rules, they are what truly makes us happy. Not happy in a superficial way, not the happiness you get from an iPod or from a nice car, but a sincere and authentic happiness that you'll learn can only come from following God's morality. In my quest for happiness, I'm always looking to do the right thing, because I know that's what's going to make me happy. And the 10 Commandments are a great conscience developer. They allow us to identify and illustrate what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong, so that we can choose it in our daily lives. So right away we know if something violates the 10 Commandments, then it violates what is good and right, and it'll violate how we can be led to happiness. So when I'm trying to be a man of conscience, when I'm trying to choose what is right, I always have the 10 Commandments to fall back on.
How relevant do you find the 10 Commandments to be in the world today?
I think they're relevant if they're kind of modified to like fit everyday life in the 21st century, because like Jen said before, the stealing and the killing are kind of social norms that you know you shouldn't do, so they're kind of implied in other ways, like saying something mean about someone or taking something that you know you shouldn't, things like that.
Yeah, and it's kind of just getting into everyday situations where the 10 Commandments are present in what they tell you not to do or what they tell you what you should follow. Say with number 6, how if you say you go to the beach and you see all these girls in bikinis and you're looking at them and you're lusting, well, you're not really supposed to be doing that, and it's present in everyday life, so it happens all the time.
I don't even know if they need to be modified that much though, because while it is a social norm not to kill, like people still murder. So like we should also concentrate on the main commandment as well as
like not killing?
Yeah, like not killing.
I think they're pretty eternal. I think you could always follow them, but I think nowadays people have trouble following number 10, which is thou shalt not covet your neighbor's goods. Mm-hmm. Like they always want something more, you know, everyone just wants more, and they just need to step back and appreciate what they have.
I always find myself breaking the second commandment, thou shalt not say the Lord's name in vain, because it's so easy. Like people today are so easily saying like, oh my, you know, and it's so easy to just say that and just rolls off the tongue, and it's not something we should do because it's against God's law.
And you know, the ironic part is that's not even one of the worst things to say nowadays, which is actually kind of despicable if you think about it.
Let's go back to the teens in the street and find out if they use the 10 Commandments as guidelines for their life.
So do you use the 10 Commandments as a guideline for your life? Yes or no?
Personally? Yeah, absolutely.
No, not really.
No. No, not exactly.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the same thing with karma, you know. I don't want to do something that's going to come back to me in the wrong way, you know.
I do get the questions you've been asking are actually pretty convenient because I do one of my problems is that I do get angry pretty easily, but like stealing and cursing, I try and lay off a little bit, you know.
I use them, and I don't. I choose the ones that I use carefully, you know. I don't use all of them though, especially the parent one. It's just not don't steal. You know, that's a given. You know, don't kill. I don't want to kill anybody. You know, stuff like those. They could stay forever. It's just certain ones need to, you know, a little up the ante a little bit.
I can't say I break them, but I don't actually know them all to say that I follow them.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I grew up originally with, so I have to say, like, that's what my first guidelines of morals was.
While some of the commandments seem to have made more of an impression on people than others,
all of them are important.
for Catholics, the commandments are more than just an ancient list of rules.
And more than mere suggestion.
Catholics recognize timeless truths in the commandments given by God in order that we might grow into both human fulfillment and union with God.
The Catechism gives us a thorough explanation of each commandment and helps us to understand the commandment in light of modern challenges.
Yeah, for instance, one of the teens in the street said we needed a commandment for drug dealing, but drug dealing falls under the 5th commandment, thou shalt not kill.
Memorizing the commandments is a good thing, but understanding their full meaning makes it much easier to practice them in our everyday lives.
The commandments may seem intimidating to some people.
Some of us may even be afraid that we cannot live up to them.
Next, Jeff tells us why they may scare some people, and also talks about how Jesus summed up the 10 Commandments in the Gospel of Matthew.
Sometimes the 10 Commandments can scare us because they call us to not live for ourselves, but to live for others. And there's been times in my life where I forget that, where I forget to live for others and instead live for my own daily happiness, for my own personal and immediate gratification. And the 10 Commandments are a great way to call back to that living for others. For example, it's very easy for us to start to judge by society's expectations and society's morals instead of the way God sees the world, instead of seeing the world through God's eyes, through God's morality. It's so easy for us because we're constantly bombarded with magazines and TV and even music that instead of supporting God's view of the world, it supports a completely immoral one. You know, Christ said the greatest commandment is to love your God with all your heart and soul and mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And it's such a difficult challenge for us. And really, in asking us to love each other, Christ sums up all the 10 Commandments. Because if all we do is act in love for ourselves and for our friends and for our family and for our enemies and for our God, if all we do is act in love, then we could not act in love and at the same time violate one of the 10 Commandments. They are love. They exemplify love. The 10 Commandments and Christ's golden commandment show us how to love perfectly like He loves us.
So do you guys ever feel like the 10 Commandments are too difficult to live up to?
Actually, listening to what Jeff said, he made a good point in how the media bombards us with all the appealing stuff that we really want to do in our lives, and that people stray from following the commandments because it's so tempting to just fall into the trap of wanting to do these things. But we need to realize that the 10 Commandments are a better guide for us, and they make us better people, and they humble us. And I think that's what he was trying to say.
I think that number 10 particularly is hard to follow, like Caitlin was saying earlier, especially with the media too. Like, I always want like this pair of sunglasses or that brand of shoes, and there's magazines and TV always telling you that you should have that kind of thing.
And that commandment, which one is it? Where the third one, keep holy the Sabbath. I mean, with so many busy schedules nowadays, like, oh, practice, oh, I was up late last night, oh, I didn't want to sleep in because I have school on the weekends. It just gets difficult sometimes to always make it to church every single Sunday.
I actually think it's not too difficult to live up to 10 Commandments because, you know, people are doing it all around us. There are people in the world who are following the 10 Commandments, you know, and they're the people that we can like look up to as examples. And, you know, you may slip up once in a while. You may, you know, or more often than once in a while, but that doesn't mean you're not following the 10 Commandments. That just means, you know, you made a mistake. Ask for God's forgiveness and He'll be there for you, you know. I think that following the 10 Commandments should be kind of like our first goal in life. And I really think if we put ourselves to the task, then it's not too difficult. On the mission trip to Appalachia, Jeff came face to face with someone who taught him about living the 10 Commandments.
Next, he shares the story of a special lady who had a few material possessions but was rich in her devotion to God and His plan for her life.
You know, I've had the opportunity to go down to West Virginia to serve down there, to help out. And I'm always amazed at how, just by a simple act of kindness and helping someone rebuild their home or rerun the electricity in their house or whatever it is, how they always feel the love you're giving them and reciprocate so intensely. And I think that the reason for that is because when we go down there and we serve, in so many ways we're fulfilling the exact point of the 10 Commandments. When we go down there and we give of our time, we're not focused on our job or on having more money or on having the best image. You know, we're focusing on serving our one real God. When we go down there, we're not being prejudiced, we're not putting others down. Instead, we're trying to be one and lifting each other up. When we go down there, we're not living a lie. We're walking the walk and talking the talk. So when we go down and we serve others, it enables us to really exemplify the 10 Commandments and show how the 10 Commandments lead to loving and being loved. Helping out a woman who had lost everything. She had had houses and barns burned down by fires. She had had health problems with her and her family members, job problems, everything that we hold and take for granted, she didn't have. Everything that we're so lucky she didn't have. But despite not having so many things we take for granted, despite losing so much and having so many terrible, terrible things happen to her, she continually was thankful. She continually was saying, oh, thank Jesus that I'm okay, or that I'm still alive, or that I have this. When to us it seemed like so little, to her it seemed like so much. And I think that in many ways, she was exemplifying the 10 Commandments, because she was not being selfish, she was not being vain, she was not living in the world's eyes of morality. Instead, she had her eye fixed on the ball. She knew that she was still given by God the tools to be successful in His mission for her. And it was so humbling to be around her because really in a lot of ways she knew far more than we did.
I definitely agree with him. Though the people who live their life by the 10 Commandments, you know, and aren't vain and aren't greedy, those are the people who, you know, make us with all of our material possessions and, you know, so-called knowledge, we kind of come out of that looking bad, you know. I think we have a lot to learn from people like that. So have you guys ever known someone like this who was an example of how to live by the 10 Commandments?
Mother Teresa.
It's a good one.
Yeah. Like just religious figures like that. Like you mentioned John Paul II before the show. You know, we were bouncing back ideas. So just religious heads.
One of my teachers at school, my religion teacher, Sister Leslie, she's a nun, so obviously she's religious, but I really think that there's obviously times where she can't like everybody and has to like put up with it anyways and really does it with grace.
I know my dad, he's a very, very humble person. He doesn't take anything he has for granted. He's a person who is happy that he has a job and he has a successful life and he has a good family and he has a house, and he's always reverent and he's always showing me how to live by the 10 Commandments, and he's showing me how to live like God and be a better person, and it really helps me in my everyday life.
It's difficult for us today to look to God for the truth in our lives, especially when we are bombarded by contrary messages in the media.
Messages that try and convince us that the truth lies elsewhere, or that happiness comes from what you can buy.
How many of us have fallen into the trap, the temptation of living for something rather than for God?
Let's go back to the teens in the street and find out if God is a factor when it comes to their daily decision making.
Hey, how important is God when it comes to your decisions that you make in your life?
Well, I'm not really a religious person, but I'm sure he's looking down at me, seeing exactly what I do, so I know if I do something wrong, it will come back to me.
Yeah, I just try to do what I think should be done, you know?
When I look back on things, I usually ask for forgiveness, so I should put that in my life more daily. But I mean, he does impact it in real severe things.
I don't really believe in what people teach about him, so yeah, he's not really that much of a part of my life right now.
Not important at all. I don't think about him. He's not always on my mind.
He doesn't play that big of a part in mine.
You know, when I'm making a decision, I don't think first, what would God do? I don't really look at it that way.
So you look at it more as right and wrong?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I ask myself, I think about everything that I did, and I wonder if I would get into heaven. Like, I'm scared of heaven and hell, you know? I'm scared of both, because I'm scared I won't get in, I'm scared I'm going to go to hell, you know? So when it comes to things that my decision making, God plays a big role, because, you know, I believe in God, but that whole religion thing is like, you know, but so I pray that God would take me in, you know? So before I do something, I think, okay, will he appreciate this?
I don't want to go to hell, so so like if something's wrong and I'm gonna go to hell for it, I'm not gonna do it. So God plays a part in that. Like, I don't know. I think he's a good guy.
Nothing like a little fear of going to hell to get you back on the right track.
Yeah, that's something to think about. What about you? How is God part of your decision making?
Well, I try to follow the 10 Commandments every day, and I find that since I am following them, I'm a happier person.
Yeah, Caitlin brings up a good point. A lot of times with the messages we get from the world, especially the media, they're trying to get us to do all these other things that we think will make us happy, but really God knows our hearts. He made us, and when we do what he calls us to do, that's when we find true fulfillment.
And you always have a good feeling, like when you know you're following the 10 Commandments, or like when someone just like points out, oh, that was like a really nice thing to do, you just like get a good feeling inside, which is like the best way to live.
That's true. And then sometimes, you know, you need the 10 Commandments like as a guideline. So in a sense, you're kind of asking God for help sometimes. You're not just looking at them like, oh, this is what I should and shouldn't do. I mean, sometimes, like we said, like gossiping, thou shalt not kill. That's not exactly what you think about when you mention killing. So it's kind of, you kind of have to ask God for help with like some of the minor things that aren't stated bluntly.
The truth is that moral goodness requires practice. It can be just as difficult as working hard to make a varsity sport or getting ready to audition for a spot in the orchestra.
It also makes a big difference in the outcome if you are working toward the goal out of love.
We all know that love for something or someone motivates us to work harder to attain or sustain it.
Next, Jeff gives us some advice on how to follow the 10 Commandments.
And reminds us that even if we have broken them, we shouldn't give up.
I think prayer makes it much easier to follow the 10 Commandments, because it's in times of prayer that we can, one, learn more about God's will for us and understand it. But two, we can learn more about ourselves and become comfortable enough with it to defy what society wants of us and instead focus on the 10 Commandments. And it's in times of prayer that we are given the strength from God to really fight evil, to fight this world that has the wrong ideas for us, and to instead go and try and follow the 10 Commandments. Since the 10 Commandments are so hard to follow, we always are constantly falling. But it's really important that we continually keep out an effort to try and do as the 10 Commandments say. But there are many who don't put out that effort, who really don't follow the 10 Commandments very well. And I think sometimes we feel like the 10 Commandments cause us to be regretful, cause us to feel guilty. Which is why I think it's really important that when we're talking about the 10 Commandments, to also talk about Christ's forgiveness. Even when he was hanging on the cross, Christ said, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. And I think it's important to remember that no matter how many times you've broken the commandments, what's important is to seek forgiveness, to try and be forgiven, and hopefully that'll entail going to confession. And then from there, focusing on not how we've broken them, but on how we want to fulfill them from here on.
How has trying to live by the 10 Commandments helped you in your life?
I find that when I follow the 10 Commandments, I'm a more positive person, and that makes more people want to be around me and also makes better relationships with others.
I know for me, being the best person I can be is the most important thing in my life, and the 10 Commandments are the best avenue towards that goal for me.
I like the 10 Commandments because, like you said, trying to be the best person you can be. And, you know, God calls us to be good people, but sometimes we need a concrete way, you know, steps how to do that. And the 10 Commandments really provides those guidelines and that outline for how to live the way God calls us to.
Keeping the 10 Commandments are part of the way we live in covenant relationship with the God who made us.
The commandments show us how to live faithfully every day of our lives.
Every morning we can pray, Jesus, help me to be the best I can be today. And we can trust that we will have all the help that we need.
Secure in who we are becoming and in the love God has for us.
We begin to understand how much our actions affect others and the kind of impact we have on our world.
This is a part of forming a right conscience and practicing to live a moral life.
Do you find the 10 Commandments relevant in your life?
We want to know.
Contact us through our website.
The address is www.realfaithtv.com.
Or you could call us at 609-406-7402.
And remember that the 10 Commandments are just as relevant to our lives today as they were when Moses received them on Mount Sinai.
The challenges we face today may be different, but the way to meet them is the same.
Love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength.
And love your neighbor as yourself.
The 10 Commandments help us to live as people of character and conscious disciples of Christ for the 21st century.
Thanks for watching.
We'll see you next time on
Real Faith TV. God bless.